First, you take a drink. Then the drink takes a drink. And then the drink takes you. F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Are you ready to make the most of the only life you have? To make smart money choices focused on achieving what you care about most? Here to help you balance living well today without sacrificing your tomorrow is the Retirement Answer Man, Roger Whitney.
About 12 years ago, I was sitting in a conference room with a fairly new client. We'll call him Billy. Billy and his wife had been married for 30 years, and they were retired for the last 4.5 years by this point. And I was asking him a little bit about their history in retirement and how they're liking it so far. And he said, Roger, when my wife and I first retired, we decided to move into one of those gated golf course communities because we loved golf and we thought it would be great to hang out with other people that loved golf. And it would be this nice, tight-knit community. So we moved into one of these communities, got the golf cart with the Mercedes emblem on it. I mean, we were styling. It was great. And we met a lot of wonderful people. We played a lot of golf. But after 2 years, we realized, man, we got to get the heck out of there. Although we love these people and we love golf, if we don't, we're going to become alcoholics. Because what would happen is it was so social, if you can say that easily, that they would ride their golf to friends' house, friends would come to their house, and there was just too much drinking, and it wasn't congruent with how they saw themselves in retirement. So they sold the golf course house, they sold the Mercedes golf cart, and moved out to a more rural area where they were more at peace with how they wanted to live. So retirement can lead to drinking, and we're going to talk about that in the hot topic segment today. And then in the practical planning segment, we're all in on listener questions. We're going to answer questions from Nani on refinance, from Ruth on Social Security, John on password managers, and Bill on the problem with retirement planning. So we can't do any of that, though, until we get to the all-important disclaimer. That's right. It's time for that all-important disclaimer. Now, a listener emailed me, this is probably a month ago or so now, and they found my show and they binged listened to all 160 plus episodes, which is just mind-blowing to me. And he said it was awesome, Roger, but it got a little bit repetitive hearing that disclaimer. Can you put that to the back of the show? And I understand that if you listen to it that much, but it has to be near the front, and here's why. Because this is super important. Don't take advice from me on the show. Don't take advice from anybody you listen to if they don't have enough information to speak into your life. It's real easy to do that. I only give advice to clients that I work for as a fiduciary. I'm accepting clients. If you want advice from me, go to rogerwhitney.com and we can set up a time to chat. But until that time, think of this as helpful hints and education before you make any decisions. Talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor, because that's just common sense. Hey, now let's get back to the drinking. Well, in the news today, alcohol abuse is the #1 substance abuse problem for older adults. According to an article in MarketWatch.com, written by Sarah Yogev, PhD and psychologist, alcohol abuse by retirees, those older, is a problem. In the article, she says over 3 million adults 55 and older suffer from alcohol abuse, and that number is expected to reach over 6 million by 2020. So what are some of the common reasons that retirees might abuse alcohol or be more susceptible to it anyway? Well, loneliness is a big contributing factor to try to combat feeling lonely because we don't have a robust social network. Boredom is a big contributor to it. And then, like Billy, like we talked about, leisure time encourages a lot of social drinking, and it's very easy to fall into that. So in the article, and I'll have a link to it in 6 Shot Saturday, Dr. Yogev, if I pronounce that correctly, talks about 6 factors that can contribute to retirees drinking too much. The first one is the reason for retiring. What she says is that if retirement is involuntary, that can be a contributor to turning to alcohol in retirement. Mainly because the retiree, because it's involuntary, didn't have time to plan and envision what retirement would be and what they were going to do. So they get a little lost. Whereas if the person voluntarily retires, the risk of alcohol abuse is substantially less. The second reason that she talks about is your social network. Now, if you have a social network like Billy did, they created a social network that promoted leisure drinking, then that's going to be a big influence on it. Or rather than where they moved to, which is out in the country, where it was a lot less a part of the social fabric of that community. The third reason that might contribute, or factor that can possibly contribute to alcohol abuse, she says, is what work was like before you retired. Interestingly, if you leave stressful work, that might result in less alcohol consumption in retirement, while leaving work that you found really rewarding might make you more susceptible to abusing alcohol in retirement. And that's interesting. You would think it might be the opposite, but if you leave work that is rewarding, it creates a void of purpose and fulfillment that could be filled by something. Whereas if you're really stressed out, you're more relieved to be in retirement. So I guess that makes sense, although I would have thought it was the other way initially. The fourth factor she cites is your age at retirement. She says that you're more likely to abuse alcohol or be susceptible to it if you retire at a younger age. The idea being that it may be involuntary because of health issues, or there's more apt to be bored and having a void of purpose in your life. The fifth factor, which makes total sense, is financial stress. Financial stress can be a contributor to alcohol. And then the sixth one, which I thought was important, not that they all aren't, is your marriage, the quality of your marriage. And she wrote a book called A Couple's Guide to Happy Retirement. I have not read it. Maybe I'll read it and get her on the show. She says roughly 2/3 of retirees experience increased marital conflicts and lower marital satisfaction in the first 2 years of retirement. So that can contribute to alcoholism. But that's an interesting statement. I'm going to have to get this book and go through that, because I think your social network and a happy marriage are by far keys to having a great life. And the fact that all retirees tend to experience less satisfaction early in retirement is a little bit scary, and we may need to dive into that a little bit more. So I think this is something we need to be aware of when you are looking towards retirement, to make sure you don't fall into the trap that Billy and his wife did. Now, they were smart enough or aware enough that this wasn't a healthy environment, and they were able to extract themselves and create a social network that supported who they wanted to be in retirement. So I just want to make sure this is on the radar for you, because I don't want you to fall down this path. Now, let's get on to some great listener questions and comments. Hey, welcome to the practical planning segment, where we were going to answer listener questions today. I don't know why I did that way. First question is from Nani on refinancing. So she says, I'm thinking of refinancing my mortgage for a lower rate and taking money out for credit card debt and education of my 2 kids. I don't know much about Nani. That's really all I know, what you just heard. So let's talk about refinancing the house. So Nani, I think it definitely makes sense to refinance your home to get a lower rate. Whether it's a 30-year or a 15-year mortgage, if you can get a lower rate and the numbers work based on what your closing costs and how long you'll be in the house and everything else, that's important. In fact, let's stop there for a second. Let's talk about refinancing a house. Some of the considerations are, okay, what is the payback on lowering my interest rate? Because you're going to have costs involved. You're going to have all the closing costs in redoing the mortgage. It's going to extend the term out because you're resetting the clock on a 30-year or 15-year mortgage. So you got to make sure that you're going to be in the house long enough to realize the benefit of the refinance. if the payback on refinancing the house is 4 years, let's say, and you think you're probably going to move in a year or 2 or 3, then it may not make sense to refinance because you're never going to get the benefit of that. So that's an important thing to look at, is what is your visibility on how long you'll be in that house. Now, you're talking about extracting money to pay credit card debt off. So let's talk with that one, and then we'll talk about the college one. That concerns me, and this is why. Because yes, you are accessing some of the value of your home to pay off higher interest rate debt, credit card debts. But to do that, you don't want to do that if treating the cause of the credit card debt to begin with, right? If you're just treating the symptom, you've run up money on a credit card for whatever reason, and then you do a refinance, take money out, pay the credit card debt, and then you don't treat the cause, which is maybe it's overspending or not having enough emergency fund. I don't know the details, but you don't want to do that and then find yourself a year or 2 down the road with the credit card debt back up to where it is or higher. Then you really didn't accomplish anything, and you've actually hurt yourself by taking money out of the value of your home via a loan. So until you have whatever the cause of the credit card debt taken care of, I definitely wouldn't recommend that you take money out to pay off that credit card, because you got to treat the symptom. Now let's talk about taking money out for education. That is also an option. Before I did that, I would get really creative with the kids on their college experience. Now, I don't know you, Nani. I don't know anything about you other than what we just read here, is before you take money out of your home, which could financially handicap you to educate your children, let's make sure how you're approaching college is really well thought out. And what do I mean by that? Well, not everybody has to go to a 4-year college. I went to a community college for a year before I transferred to a 4-year college. There are a lot of different programs at community colleges that are substantially less expensive than going to a 4-year college, where they could live at home, go to community college, and also the second factor of that is they could work to help contribute to it. These are all options that I think should be on the table and openly discussed with the kids prior to you taking money out of your home equity in order to fund their education. Now, I say that and understand the lens that I see that from, Nani, is one, my experience of going to community college and then transferring to a big-time university. I thought I should have probably went to the community college for 2 years rather than 1. It was substantially less expensive. I was able to work and contribute to my college expenses. I was able to live at home, which decreased the cost significantly. And I did not hurt my educational experience at all. So I see it from that lens. The second lens I see it from is I see many parents, and I'm not saying this is you, Nani, enable their children to go to 4-year colleges because they want to give them that experience, or the kids really want it, and we always want to do what's right for our kids. And sometimes get degrees in subjects that don't prepare them for any type of work experience. I've seen families almost commit financial suicide to fund hundreds of thousands of dollars for degrees that teach the child no skill that they can use in the marketplace. And that always concerns me. When you're looking at college, it should be done as a business transaction of, okay, I'm investing in my child, or I'm investing in myself with the hope of getting this type of return in the workplace later on. I see way too much that is not worked into the equation of what's the end result that we're hoping for after this person gets out of school, whether it's yourself or your child. And the sooner you help them see that and let them be part of the solution, the better for them. And then it will help you protect your goals, because I'm assuming, Nani, want to work and retire to help you protect your goals and make sure the money is being used wisely. So those are some of the things I would think about before taking money out of your mortgage for either credit card debt or education. Now, our next question comes from Ruth, and it's about taking Social Security. It's funny. I actually dove into this one for a while. I had some fun with this one. So let me read what Ruth wrote. She said, I just found your podcast and have been binge listening. Worse than Netflix. Well, God bless you, Ruth. My husband and I are 62 years old and we are retired. But my husband has a part-time job. We are financially set with a very substantial net worth. I won't say the number. My question is regarding taking Social Security at age 62 and investing it. Even at a mere 5%, she says, my monthly Social Security check of $1,879 would grow to $666,045 by the time I'm age 80. So if she got a 5% return, she could build up, over $500,000 by the time she's 80. If I took and spent the money monthly, I would only be receiving $405,864 by the time I am 80. So she's talking about if I just took the money and spent it, I could grow this money over the 18 years we're talking about. She said also, if I invested this $1,879 monthly benefit I would get at age 62 and got a return of 8%, it could grow to over $900,000. And she says, I know there are variables like the market downturn and taxes, but in my eyes, taking the money and investing it is a better deal for me in the long run. What are your thoughts? Well, Ruth, I've talked about Social Security from a number of different perspectives over the years. But when you take Social Security, really depends. People hate that answer. I know. It sounds a little wishy-washy, but it really does depend. So what does it depend on? So for each individual, it's going to depend on a number of factors. It's going to depend on the mix of your assets by class taxification. How much do you have in Roth? How much do you have in tax deferred? How much do you have in taxable assets? And the reason that's important is because that's going to determine where you access funds to help fund your retirement, and that works into the Social Security calculation. It depends on the amount of guaranteed payments you have, like pensions or rental income or other types of things. It's going to depend on your life expectancy, whether you have a family history of longevity or not. It's going to depend on the spread between your Social Security benefit and your husband's Social Security benefit. It's going to depend on your estate goals and many more things. So it does depend on the entirety of the situation. But let's stick with your scenario of, do I take Social Security at age 62 and invest, or wait until age 66 and invest? So we're just going to assume you don't need the Social Security at all. So in your scenario, you said at a 5% assumed return, those monthly checks would grow to $666,000. And then at an 8% assumed return, those would grow to $911,000 and some odd dollars. So reasonable assumptions, both of those, depending on how aggressive you invested that. But it's never as simple as that. And we talked about that from time to time. That's the problem with most calculators, especially when we're making some fairly important decisions. Because if we assume a 5% return, or an 8% return, then we're assuming that you get that return every single year. So it's 5% year one, 5% year two, 5% year three, and on and on and on, with no variation of returns. That has a dramatic effect on what the result is. One, because of the consistency of returns, where you don't experience downturns that you have to make up for. And two, just the compounding effect of a consistent return over a period of time can be pretty dramatic. And you said, there could be market downturns. Yes, there could. And to really make a decision, you have to factor in those numbers into the entire equation, because your actual result likely will be nowhere close to what a linear return of getting the same return every single year. And we have to factor that in. In fact, as I was researching this issue, there were articles that were using the 5% and the 8% return, saying why you should take the money early in retirement and invest it, assuming you don't need it. And it just used the linear rates to make their determination. So what I did is I ran very simple Monte Carlo simulations to test the theory. Okay, what might the return be? And this will allow us to show the possible variations in return that you might get given a certain asset allocation just based on all the historical data. So I created two reports. that I'm going to share with everybody in 6-Shot Saturday to show you what I came up with, and I'll try to describe it here on the podcast. So here's what I'm assuming in the 2 tests that I ran on Ruth's issue. So I'm assuming that she takes Social Security based off of her own benefit. I'm assuming there won't be taxes or reduction to benefit due to other income. So I'm just going to neutralize that. I'm assuming your husband will claim on his own benefit and not on a spousal benefit, not on your benefit. I'm going to assume that taxes on earnings and everything are suppressed because I just want to keep this as simple as possible for this sake and for the report's sake. And then I'm assuming all the numbers are in current dollars, so I'm not going to be factoring inflation into it. So the first scenario I ran was Ruth took Social Security early and invested the entire amount, which is about $22,548 annually, into a portfolio that's fairly aggressive. We'll call it 62% in stocks and 28% in bonds. And we suppressed taxes and inflation. And what I did was I ran a Monte Carlo scenario with that asset allocation and the annual contributions of her early Social Security check coming in. And I ran 1,000 iterations of possible market experiences based on the historical data of those asset classes. Now, these asset classes you can't invest in directly. So realize that, and we're not forecasting. Well, I'm giving you all my disclaimer stuff. This is just an intellectual exercise here. And so what these simulations do is they factor in that you might get the average return, but it's lumpy in the way that it actually happens. Because if you have a portfolio like this that's 72% stocks and 28% bonds, well, it depends on what season. There have been long seasons where the return on that allocation were well below what the overall average is over time, and sometimes it's well above. We can look at the S&P 500 index, which is something you can't invest in directly, but from 1968 to 1983, it was at the exact same level. So there can be long periods of time where you don't get a lot of return. So this factors in that variability to get to what really is the result. So for Ruth, in this instance, if she invested that $22,548 annually, and we invested in that portfolio of 72% stocks and 28% bonds, the high result was $738,619. So that was on the high end. The median value was $453,864, and the low value was $325,044. So you can see what her possible experience could have a very wide range based on at least the historical data of how an allocation like that would have acted. So it's not as simple saying you get a 5% return and it's going to grow to over $600,000. It might not. It might be a bad decision in the end. So the second scenario I ran was I assumed that Ruth took her Social Security at age 66 rather than age 62. So she missed out on some years of getting cash flow to invest. But when Social Security turned on at age 66, at her full retirement age, it was a higher amount that was being invested annually. So rather than investing $22,548 per year at age 62, we said, okay, what if we invested $30,000 annually starting at age 66 and forecast with the same asset allocation what that had a possibility of growing to at age 80. So we got less years of investing, but we have higher amounts being investing once it started. And it was interesting. The high value for the scenario 2 starting at age 66 was about $758,000, which is a little higher than the first scenario starting at age 62, which was $738,000. The median value was almost identical, right around $450,000. And the low value was a little bit lower, $278,000 versus $325,000. So basically what we just did here is we compared taking Social Security early and investing it in a portfolio of 72% stocks, 28% bonds. And we compared that to taking security at full retirement age and investing in the same allocation. And we ran scenarios of what might these be worth at age 80. And the conclusion is it's not a clear winner. It's not a clear winner that it totally makes sense to take it early. Other items that you would really factor in is taxes. You might factor in that, Social Security will have COLA adjustments. We might want to factor that all in. But the decision ultimately needs to be based on more information. So simply doing the math and factoring in the variability returns paints a much different picture than using linear returns that we see in a lot of articles. It just because they vastly overstate what the returns might be in most cases. So, Ruth, hopefully that helped. If you want the two reports of these two scenarios that I outlined, I will share them in this Saturday's 6-Shot Saturday. If you're not a member of that, you can go to rogerwhitney.com and sign up for 6-Shot Saturday, and you'll get those emails every Saturday morning. So hopefully you can see things aren't quite as easy as we think they are sometimes. So our next comment, not really a question, comment comes from John, but I thought it was really important. We had one of the developers of 1Password on, the password manager, a few weeks ago, and John had some comments on it. He said his only pain he had was when he heard the gentleman say, "We have many smart people working for us," as one of his answers, which kind of reminded me of a couple occasions, a financial advisor saying, "We have many smart people working for us and we can do better than those returns." And he said LastPass, which is a competitor of 1Password, was hacked 3 or 4 years ago. So it would have been nice to have heard this gentleman talk about that security. So if, I didn't realize that at the time that LastPass had that issue, but it would have been great to hear the gentleman from 1Password talk about potential for having all of this stuff hacked. Now, John said, he had access to something called LearnVest through his company, and he asked them how secure all of his passwords, since they track all of his accounts. And the answer was, "We don't keep your passwords on our servers." And this is John talking. But that didn't really answer the question. Eventually, he got a detailed answer from this company, LearnVest, in that they outsourced all their security storage to another company for encryption. And that is actually a very common thing to do. But it still doesn't get to how secure all that stuff is, right? Because whoever they outsource to has to do that in a very prudent way as well. So it can be a little bit scary, and I totally get that. And I agree with John on smart is very overrated. We got lots of smart people working for us. Doesn't really do anything for me. Everybody's smart. It's, wisdom and common sense is important. And when it comes down to the web and security, I think you and I need to take proactive steps not to be an easy target, right? We need to not use our birth date or our children's name as our password for everything. We need to not have it all written down on an unencrypted computer or on paper taped to our desk. We need to not be the easy target. And using a 1Password or LastPass or any of these other services, which will help us use very complex passwords and make doing that easier for us, makes us less attractive targets. Sure, ultimately, there's going to be risk in having services like this have that data, but I would wager to say that it's probably a lot safer than how we would normally do it. And it seems very difficult to impossible to verify providers are doing the same. So everything seems to be outsourced, thus interconnected, but it still makes us a lot less attractive than what we would do otherwise. So definitely consider this, but I think those are great points, John. Thanks for making those. So our last comment comes from Bill in response to the series that we had on what the problem is with retirement planning. And I love how he starts us off. Bill says, "I didn't learn anything. The thesis seemed to be I don't even know how to pronounce it, which I don't disagree with, but hiring a financial advisor won't change the math. There is no secret sauce. The couple in your example simply are going to have to spend a lot less money in retirement or work another 15 years. You can't save 10% of your income, spend 90, and then retire early with pre-retirement lifestyle. My wife and I are in an almost identical situation, but we save 50% of our income. It's a simple math equation, and math doesn't care." Now, I get his point. it does come down to math. But where I think Bill, where I have issue with what Bill says is it is much more complex than a math problem. By just simply sticking to that very tight math problem, it ignores so many different variables that can play into creating a life that you want. Correct. One of those variables, like Bill points out, is maybe it's not living your pre-retirement lifestyle. There are a lot of different levers than just simply save and invest and hope it grows to be enough. So sorry you didn't learn anything, Bill. I disagree with you a little bit in that it's much more complex than the simple math problem.
On your marks, get set.
Hey, welcome to the Smart Sprint segment where we take a baby step into making better decisions with our money and creating a great life. So your baby step for this week is to check the interest rate on any and all debts that you have. It could be a car loan. It could be your mortgage. It could be credit card loans. It could be student loans. Check where your interest rates are and see if it makes sense to refinance those in some way. Interest rates are near all-time lows. Seem to be, anyway, in the beginning of a rising cycle of interest rates. So this is maybe your last chance or close to it to lock in rates on some of the debts that you have out there. So do that in the next 7 days. Hey, welcome to the Happy Lab, where we noodle on, well, being happier now and creating a happy life. Real simple one this week. Take care of yourself. Listen to your body. Last Sunday when I was working out, at the end of my workout, I got up and all of a sudden my lower back was killing me. And now all week I've been out of the commission. It's been hard to move. It stiffens up real quickly. And you realize how blessed most of us are to not deal with many of these chronic illnesses. It makes you appreciate standing up real quickly and walking down the stairs a lot. And it's real easy to forget how blessed we may be. So whether you're dealing with chronic illness or you're not, take proactive steps to improve your situation from a health perspective. Because if your health and your body ain't happy, you ain't going to be happy. So are you wondering where you're at on your retirement journey and whether you are on course or there might be some things that you can do to correct course to get back on course? Well, if you're wondering where you're at, go to rogerwhitney.com, click on Work with Roger, and you can get a retirement checkup where we will ask you the basic questions on what your situation is, what you're trying to accomplish, and run Monte Carlo scenarios to give you more depth into whether you're on track or not. And in addition to that, you'll get to spend an hour or so with me working through the analysis and answering any of the questions to help you get you on track. So if you're interested in a retirement checkup, go to rogerwhitney.com, work with Roger. As always, I so enjoy this time with you. Until next week, this is Roger Whitney, the Retirement Answer Man.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.